Should we let people in?
Yep.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning, depending on where you're logging in from. We're going to give it a couple more minutes for folks to log in. If you are in need of ASL interpretation, our ASL interpreter Amber will be on the screen throughout the entire presentation, minus the time where we will be screen sharing. We're just going to wait a few more minutes. We just want to say thank you to everybody for joining us with such short notice. We recognize we didn't have a lot of time to promote this important webinar, but as you all know, we are in a crisis situation globally with a lot of our rights, indigenous, migratory rights, workers' rights being violated across the board. And so, we did our best to be able to get this information out to you all in a timely manner. And so we're hoping that the recording will go live and folks can share this information out, and we will be able to assist our Maori relatives with getting submissions against this bill that we have seen time and time again come back into their legislative office, attacking their treaty rights. So again, welcome everybody. My name is Eve Reyes Aguirre, Amishpan no Nawanyolke. I am going to go ahead and begin our session today with an opening prayer. Again, thank you everybody for joining us. And so I'm going to go ahead and do that here. Plaso Kamatio Mateo, Amishpan no Nawanyolke, Plaso Kamati, Ipanamwani. Creator, we ask that you join us here in this time of need and in this time where our rights are being attacked, our peoples are being attacked. And we ask that you help guide us in our process for defending our rights of our people, defending the rights of Mother Earth. We ask that you give us strength, Creator, during these rough times, these times where all of our peoples are being attacked. And we ask that you guide us with the strength of our ancestors. And we ask that you walk with us in these quests that we have in front of us to fight against these racist bills, to fight against the racist legislation that's happening all over the world. And we ask that you are there to give us strength during these difficult times that all of our people are facing. Tasoka Mateo Mateo. Before we begin, I just wanted to thank all of our sponsors and all of our supporters for sharing out the information. Without our team of amazing activists, we wouldn't be able to pull together such a important webinar in such short notice. So just wanted to say thank you to all of our sponsors and appreciate the time that they have taken to put this webinar together. I also wanted to talk a little bit about why this particular webinar is so important in these times. Right now, treaty rights are under attack, and that's not just there in Aotearoa or here on Turtle Island. It's happening globally. Our people are being attacked, and the importance of treaty rights is just immense in our movement. And the reason is because these are treaty agreements that governments entered with indigenous nations. And these are laws in their legislation, in their constitutions that they have to abide by. And so for them to try to abolish these treaties is trying to abolish our rights and our land rights. And so it's very important that we take a stand against these legislations that are happening that are trying to abolish our treaty rights. The same type of attacks are happening here in Turtle Island. with our relatives from the Dakotas, our Lakota relatives. They also are fighting for the protection of their treaty rights. And we saw that play out on the international stage at Standing Rock. Our relatives in the South, our Mapuche relatives, are also fighting to protect their treaty rights. We stand in solidarity with them. Our treaty rights here in the States, in the so-called US, are also under attack with our Western Shoshone relatives. And also in the North, our relatives in the Treaty 9 area, our First Nation relatives are under attack. And there is legislation that is happening throughout the globe around critical minerals. The tactic is they want to attack our treaty rights so that they can gain access to our territories in order to mine them for critical minerals. This is an important connection between what's happening here, what's happening in the South, what's happening in Aotearoa, what's happening globally. There is a frenzy for governments to collect rights to territories and land so that they can access critical minerals. So the reason why it is so important for us to fight these racist laws is because when we defeat them, we close the door and we show that we, the people, have the power to shut down their agenda to take over our territories and further diminish our resources and further cause harm to our Mother Earth. So with that being said, I'm going to pass it over to my dear sister, Tina Nata, who is here to talk about the Treaty Principles Bill and to talk about what we can do to support them. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sister Evie. Tēnā koutou, i ngā whānau ngō ngā hauewha. Thank you very much, and greetings to everybody from the Four Winds. Really appreciate Tōna Tierra, the American Indian Law Association, the Catalyst Project, all of our allied associations who are supporting us to hold this follow-up webinar from the Treaty Principles Bill for the new iteration, which is the Regulatory Standards Bill. Evie is absolutely on the mark. There is a reason why our treaty rights are being attacked, and that's because Indigenous treaties with colonizing governments, and in fact Indigenous rights movements in general, have been one of the strongest roadblocks to corporate extraction from our Mother Earth. And that has been the case for a long time, that we have been a roadblock to corporate extraction. And so they're essentially looking to get rid of those roadblocks. They have been doing it for many, many years. But what we have seen in more recent years, particularly from over the last couple of decades, is a pushback from the far right and a mainstreaming of far right and white supremacist agendas that lead to global leaders like Bolsonaro, Trump, Johnson, and indeed us in Aotearoa, New Zealand, are now under a far right government as well, where governments are moving to protect and in fact constitutionalize the rights of corporations so that they can continue their extraction. And what that looks like for us in Aotearoa now is the Regulatory Standards Bill. So I'm going to just quickly give us an overview, and then I'm going to bring my other sister Tanya up, and we're going to have a little bit of a chat about what the Regulatory Standards Bill means for us at a national but also at a global level. And hopefully we're going to get some submissions done as well. So for those many of you who are joining us today were also a part of our previous webinar that we did with the same groups on the Treaty Principles Bill, and that was over the Christmas summer winter holidays for many of you on Great Turtle Island. So just as an update to that, we received over 300,000 submissions, written submissions, and that completely smashed the record of however many submissions we have ever received for a piece of legislation. The one previous to that was about 100,000 submissions, and that was for the conversion therapy prohibition bill. And so we also received, or the government received, 16,000 requests to be heard in the oral hearings. They weren't able to accommodate that, but they were able to hear 529 oral submissions, which amounted to nearly 80 hours of oral testimony opposing the Treaty Principles Bill. Again, that was a record-breaking amount of oral testimonies that they heard as well. And that contributed to the Treaty Principles Bill being killed off at the second reading, which we were really thankful for. And we just want to take this moment to offer our genuine direct thanks to all of you who are here, who were a part of that last webinar, who also filled out your submission and were a part of helping to kill that bill. Now, on that day, this fellow, who some from so-called Canada might see him, he might look familiar, and we're going to get back to that in a second, but he was the architect of the Treaty Principles Bill, and as he walked out of the debating chamber, he said to media, "Watch this space." So he already had a plan, and in fact, that plan was already in train because the Regulatory Standards Bill was already being discussed and drafted, even as the Treaty Principles Bill was gathering submissions as well. So this was his plan B. The Treaty Principles Bill sought to redefine the treaty. The Regulatory Standards Bill just sidelines the treaty altogether. The Treaty Principles Bill sought to, well, that kind of kept the Bill of Rights Act, which is our human rights legislation, and that's one of the current tests for our for pieces of new law, is that it needs to align with the Bill of Rights Act, which outlines our human rights entitlements through legislation. But the Regulatory Standards Bill also sidelines the Bill of Rights Act. So all human rights are actually under threat under this act. And you might remember in our last webinar, that was one of our key points, is that if they come for treaty rights, they're going to come for human rights next. And that's exactly what we saw happen. They came for treaty rights first, and now the Regulatory Standards Bill comes for all human rights. So rights of differently abled people, rights of our rainbow community, women, children, migrants, all rights are under threat for this bill. The Treaty Principles Bill said everybody should have self-determination. The Regulatory Standards Bill outlines that everybody, all individual rights should be prioritized, but that also includes corporate individual rights. So they are treating corporations as having equal rights to humans. However, corporations are also, because of there are a couple of principles that would actually in this process favor corporations over humans. And one of those is the principle of formal equality. So everybody has to be treated the same. So colonization and colonial harm cannot be taken into account. Anything that makes you different cannot be taken into account. Everybody needs to be treated exactly the same, no matter what. So affirmative action and targeted policies are absolutely under threat. Whereas the Treaty Principles Bill looked to overwrite what the New Zealand courts had said about treaty principles, Regulatory Standards Bill just creates a new court, because the courts have not been playing along with these far-right neoliberal groups. So they're going to create a new court. There are some roles and responsibilities still for the courts, but the oversight of this bill will be done by what they call the Regulatory Standards Board. So a number of those principles are that new laws should provide immediate cost benefits. So that's anything that, it's material benefits and it's in the now. So anything that we want to invest in for the future, for future well-being, so things like our climate resilience or any laws also that take the future into consideration. So benefits for our future generations, which many Indigenous peoples think and live intergenerationally, that comes under threat. Even policies and funding for our elders who are seen under this model as being an economic drain would come under threat. It provides extraordinary information gathering rights to the minister as well, which place a number of our marae, our traditional gathering places, and Māori organizations under threat of being financially scrutinized and targeted. Like I said, the principle of formal equality, which is being warped, and I'm going to talk about that very soon. It's being warped in a way that is another kind of a page out of the playbook of the far right at a global space. So one of the tools that they use is that they'll say everybody must be equal before the law. And they use that language because it's easily recognizable as something that's supposed to be beneficial. But actually, that language doesn't just come from nowhere. That language comes from human rights authorities. And those human rights authorities have been very clear that actually, no, in situations of injustice, not only can you treat people differently, you should treat people differently in order to address the injustice. And so but that all gets erased by these groups. They cherry pick the language and they use language to provoke emotions and to get people indignant about their rights. And that's something that's done not just here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, but around the world by the far right. And then there's an elevation of individual property rights. Now, again, that might not sound so bad for many people, but most of our Maori land is held under collective title. It has not been individualized and cut up to individual title. So that means that a lot of Maori land would come under threat for this. And it's really just a tool for them to be able to access Maori land because like other places around the world, a lot of our Maori land has been, we have blocked corporations from coming into Maori land and have been able to protect our biodiversity in those land blocks. But individual property rights combined with immediate cost benefit would allow for corporations to be able to enter into Maori land and actually have laws scrutinized and potentially eventually repealed at some point so to enable them to be able to access Maori land and resources and extract. And as I mentioned, all of this will be overseen by a regulatory standards board, which will be appointed by the minister. And I'm going to bring my sister Tanya in soon, and we'll probably talk a little bit about how this also constitutes a centralizing of power, which is what we're also seeing happening over on Great Turtle Island, a centralizing of power, a centralizing of decision making, and a slide towards fascism. And so we've been really concerned looking at this happening and the patterns that are happening around the world with these types of behaviors. Now, like I said, that fellow might look familiar to some of our people from so-called Canada, some of our relations from so-called Canada. And that's because he was actually trained in Canada in far-right think tanks there, namely the Manning Centre and the Frontier Centre for Public Policy. His name is David Seymour, and he's now our Deputy Prime Minister. So David Seymour, like I said, he trained for many years at the Frontier Centre for Public Policy, which is known to be an anti-Indigenous, pro-extraction and supportive of oil and gas companies think tank. And the fellow on the left, Joe Flanagan, is well known as a far-right supremacist, white supremacist lobbyist as well. And so for our candidates here in Aotearoa in the ACT Party, or their candidates in the ACT Party, a part of their candidacy program is that they have to read Joe Flanagan's writings. And a number of the narrative tools or the rhetorical tools that they're currently using to advance legislation like the Regulatory Standards Bill is taken straight out of the playbook of the Frontier Centre for Public Policy. It's a part of a broader network, also the Atlas Network, which is over 500 think tanks from around the world, conservative, ranging from far right to center right neoliberal think tanks. So they generally kind of support very similar projects. It includes also the Heritage Foundation, who used to be an official partner of the Atlas Network, but now they're an affiliate. The Heritage Foundation may be familiar to some of you because they are the source of Project 2025 over on Great Turtle Island, and have also advanced projects around constitutionalizing protection of corporate interests. The Sarah Scaife Foundation, another far-right think tank, has also been involved in similar projects, and there are also connections and kind of a cross-pollination of people and policies across to our local think tank, the New Zealand Initiative. And in fact, the New Zealand Initiative was founded by the Gibbs family, and Debbie Gibbs is the chair of the Atlas Network. And the Atlas Network has funded and supported and provided training for all of these think tanks on the screen. So you can see just there's this real pattern across all of these think tanks between Great Turtle Island and New Zealand. So for instance, with climate crisis denialism, the Frontier Centre and the Heritage Foundation both deny that there's any sense of urgency. The Atlas Network trains all of their partner programs in anti-climate regulation. The Sarah Scaife Fund funds climate denial programs, groups, and PR campaigns. They are all routinely, as I said, anti-Indigenous. Both the Heritage Foundation, Frontier Centre, and New Zealand Initiative oppose what they call special treatment or preferential treatment, which we call also kind of targeted policies and affirmative action. And I should point out, the first iteration of the Regulatory Standards Bill was drafted by the New Zealand Initiative back when they were called the New Zealand Business Roundtable as well. They all promote a Euro-national identity, and so the Heritage Foundation and the Manning Centre and the New Zealand Initiative all push what they call Western values as national values. The Scaife Foundation supports far-right cultural programs, both in the US and around the world as well. They are all committed to the privatization of school systems. So the Heritage Foundation and the New Zealand Initiative both promote school choice and charter schools. Atlas runs a global school privatization campaign, and the Sarah Scaife Foundation funds charter school networks around Great Turtle Island. They are all opposed to the redistribution of wealth. So they've all lobbied aggressively against legislation like capital gains tax or pro-welfare agendas that look after people who are in the most need. And they are all dedicated to constitutionalizing corporate interests, so locking in legislation that will protect and prioritize corporate interests. And Heritage Foundation in particular are well known for Project 2025. And the Atlas Network funds all of them. So just like and what I hope everybody can hear is that what I'm saying is that it is not happenstance. This is a coordinated attack upon Indigenous interests and the interests of our planet, as Evie pointed out before. They are funded through the same channel. They share information, they trial projects in their independent spaces, and then they share the results of their projects, and then they borrow from each other's projects. So just as they are coordinated, so too do we need to be coordinated. And so today we're really thankful for the opportunity for you to coordinate with us to take a strike at this particular dimension in Aotearoa of a global project. And so sending in your submission, it is a numbers game. Sending in your submission, just like last time, will make a big difference for us. So I've just got a few tips up here around what not to do if you want your submission to be accepted. They don't accept any submissions that use swear words or abusive language or make false allegations. You can't send in repeat submissions as an individual under your own name, but you can send them in under your name, and then you can send in one as an organization as well. However many organizations you belong to, you just tick the organization option. And then just to clearly say that you oppose the bill, explicitly say in the first box that you oppose the bill, and explicitly ask them to reject the bill in the recommendation box as well. And please do tell your friends. So we've had a lot of work put into this campaign. We've just kind of been running around doing what we can to collect as many submissions. One of our incredible sisters, Tanya Waikato, who I'm about to invite up to join me to chat, and I'll just see if I can do the stop share for Tanya to be spotlit next to me. Tanya is a Māori lawyer, and she led our tribunal case. So we took the Crown to the Waitangi Tribunal around the Regulatory Standards Bill, which is our tribunal that oversees treaty violations. And Tanya and I have been working both together around this bill. So really happy to introduce you all to my sister Tanya. Tēnā koe, sis.
Tēnā koe, sis. E ngā mihi nui, kia koutou katoa. Thank you all so much for joining us this morning to help us fight against this ugly piece of legislation. And thank you to Tina for that wonderful overview about how this piece of legislation fits into that much broader global policy platform that we see being trotted out in our own backyards around the world by this network and their very far right leaning machines, I'll call them, which are not just promoting and formulating this policy, but now are funding its rollout all around the world. And it's no coincidence. We're all very familiar with the hallmarks of it and the very anti-Indigenous, anti-environment, anti-treaty rhetoric that is coming in all of these pieces of legislation. So thank you so much for being here and helping us with our fight in this little corner of the world.
I'll say. And sis, did you want to comment a little bit on just kind of any of your thoughts about the legislation and particularly international aspects of it, but the attack upon treaty rights in general also, I think Sister Evie made some really powerful points about the fact that the attacks upon Indigenous treaties are really attacks upon our planet.
Yeah, absolutely. So how we initially got involved in this particular bill was, as Tina said before, we had the Treaty Principles Bill, which caused a massive sort of outcry in New Zealand here, and we mobilised, you know, a massive number of people to make submissions against that bill. But at the same time, this piece of legislation was being promoted at the same time, very quietly, over on another website. And it was all part of a plan by this political party, the ACT Party in New Zealand, to try and undertake what we called a legislative pincer movement to distract everyone with this very blatant bill over here, while at the same time, this piece of legislation, which is very complex, very difficult to understand and break down for the average person on the street, was quietly working its way through the legislative process over here. So what we did in early January was file a claim in our Waitangi Tribunal, which is the body that looks at potential breaches of our treaty. And Tina was one of our expert witnesses that we had in that tribunal hearing. And what we asked the tribunal to do was to look at the consultation process that the Crown had used for this piece of legislation, which we said was fundamentally flawed from the outset because it was hiding information about how badly it breaches our treaty, about how badly it will affect not just Indigenous people in Aotearoa, but people across the board. And it was a constitutional change that they were attempting to make by stealth. So we took that case to the tribunal. The minister actually tried to block our hearing. It had been set down for early June. The minister brought the introduction of the bill forward, which would have stopped us having the hearing because the tribunal would have lost its jurisdiction. But fortunately for us, they brought our hearing forward and we managed to have our urgent hearing. And the tribunal found, yes, this does breach our treaty. It breached the principles of partnership that the Crown had agreed with Māori in 1840, that they would observe this principle of partnership. And it also breached the Crown's obligations of active protection. And so we have basically springboarded off the back of those findings that our tribunal made. They also said to the Crown, if you introduce this bill, you must stop immediately and go and consult with Māori before you move any further. And if you do not do that and you introduce this bill, you will be breaching the treaty again. And then if you proceed again along this pathway and pass this legislation, you'll be breaching the treaty again. So those were the main outcomes of that tribunal process, which was great for us because it enabled us to get some media coverage and some more support around this bill, which they had very deliberately tried to keep a lid on, keep it as low-key and as quiet as possible. And what Tina and I and our group of witnesses tried to do was basically shine the massivest spotlight that we could possibly shine on this through that tribunal process, which we are now into the submissions part of that, which is why we're doing this seminar to hopefully help us get some more submissions from our international family.
Thank you, sis. Okay, so everyone, I'm just going to go back and bring this slide deck up again. And open. Okay, so we're going to open up the breakout rooms at the moment. So if you require some direct support for making your submission, then the breakout rooms will be open and you can have some ask questions or get some direct support with our people that will be in the breakout room. So we'll just have those open up now. And then at the same time, we're going to also, in the lobby, if you'd like to stay in the lobby, I'm also going to go through how you can fill out a submission. If you have your device on you and you want to open this, you're going to do it on your phone, then feel free to use the QR code there, and that will take you to the submission site. Essentially, this is what the submission form looks like. It's just two simple boxes, and like we said before, you can write as little or as much as you like, so long as you are very explicitly saying that 1, you oppose this bill, and 2, you are asking people to reject the bill. So let me see if I can open up our page. Here we go. For the Regulatory Standards Bill. Now, this is the website. If you Google Regulatory Standards Bill Parliament, you'll probably find a link to this. But like I said before, you can also write, use the tiny URL. So just tiny URL /RSB portal, all one word, and it will bring you to this page here for the Regulatory Standards Bill. Now, We'll see if this works, because one of the things that we have been experiencing is that the website has been crashing repeatedly. Nearly every day it is crashing. So one thing we also recommend is that if you have more thoughts that you want to write, actually write them down in a Word document so that it's saved, and you can just try to copy and paste it again if the site crashes on you as well. I'll just get this out of the way. Okay, so if I come down here, I'm going to click I'm ready to make my submission, and hopefully that's going to take me to the submission page and not crash. As you can see, there are only 6 days left. It closes on the 23rd of June New Zealand time, which is the 22nd of June on Great Turtle Island. And okay, so it's going to take me onto this page. It asks me if I'm going to submit as an individual or an organization. Remember, I said you can submit once as an individual, but you can also do a submission on behalf of however many organizations you belong to. There's also no clear definition for an organization. So if you're a part of a crochet group, you can also submit under your crochet group. Just give yourselves a name and you can submit as an organization. And then here is where I'm going to tick individual. If you wish to make an oral submission to the committee, yeah. I should also mention you can also submit on behalf of any non-verbal relations that you have if you are their official a guardian, for instance. So if you have non-verbal infants, you can put a submission in on behalf of infants. You can also put in a submission, your children. There is no age and there is no citizenship and there is no residency requirement. So anybody of any age living anywhere around the world, citizen to any nation, can put in a submission. So I'm just going to put in Tina, and I'll put in and because I clicked yes, it's going to ask me for my phone number. That's because I ticked yes to an oral submission. If you don't want to speak to the select committee, tick no, and then it will just, it won't ask you for your phone number. You can tick here other country if you're submitting from outside of the country. If there's nothing else you need them to know. If you require an interpreter, then they can arrange one, but you need to let them know by ticking yes and then tell them that you require an interpreter. So here's the submission page. You can either upload your submission as a Word document, or you can go down here and you just say, I oppose this bill. Remember, it's really important that you say that explicitly. You oppose the bill and anything else you want to say. And under here, you can say, reject this bill, or you can say, I don't know, eliminate the bill, kill the bill, whatever it is that you want to say there, but just be very explicit that you want them to reject the bill. In fact, even better if you say, we want this bill rejected entirely. Otherwise, they're going to be like Lloyd on Dumb and Dumber, and they're going to come in and say, so you're telling me there's a chance, unless you are explicit in your rejection, then they will try to find a little loophole to try and tweak it for you. And then you just press next. It will give you a summary. You confirm that that's correct, and then you click submit, and your submission is done. That is how easy it is, fam. So hopefully everybody who is keen to do a submission can see how easy it is, and they're able to put one in. So we have that was so easy that we did it in just a couple of minutes. So if there are any questions, oh, Aketsali, Kia ora, Aketsali. Aketsali came and stayed with us in Aotearoa at one point. From the don't slide, what do they consider a false allegation? If I write, no, that's fine. It's false allegations against individuals. So if you were to say that, for instance, the minister is only advancing this bill so that money can go into his pocket, then they may scrutinize that. But yeah, it's usually false allegations against individuals. You can certainly say that it violates human rights. That would not be a false allegation at all. Yeah. Could we see that slide that showed side by side that talked about the regulatory standards bill? I thought it might help me to include my talking points. Sure thing. Let me bring that back up. Bring it here.
Just a quick note for those who want special help for filling out the submission. If you go to the bottom of your screen, there is a little icon that says breakout rooms, and you can click on that icon, and Danny is in that room there helping out folks to do a personal submission. If you'd like to do it in real time, she will be there to assist. So again, it's the icon at the bottom that says breakout rooms.
So as you can see there, under the Regulatory Standards Bill, it ignores our treaty, it ignores our human rights legislation, it elevates corporate individual property rights, and also I should say property is not restricted to geography, land, or physical things. That also includes intellectual property as well, and cultural property. So for instance, our traditional medicines, which could be left at risk of being targeted by pharmaceutical corporations. So yeah, corporate rights as individuals, and formal equality, which essentially means everybody needs to be treated exactly the same, no matter what, which is really a warping, quite an offensive warping of the human rights principle of equality. And it creates a new court for regulatory standards, which is appointed personally by the Minister for Regulation, David Seymour Tans. I don't know if you had any other aspects that you thought might be good for raising. I think one of the other things that we said also as well, if I come in here, the immediate cost benefit would absolutely place any climate kind of policies or funding or legislation, anything essentially that would rein in corporate power, really would be at risk.
Yeah. And that was the one I was going to mention, actually, because climate change is one of the targets of this global framework, and the corporates are trying to attack the data and all of the legislation that is supporting us getting away from the use of fossil fuels. And we had legislation, and we still have it at this stage, trying to get us to meet our international targets on that. And we had a good interview recently with one of my lecturers on climate change from my master's that I just completed, and we weren't able to bring this evidence in time in the tribunal hearing, but one of the very clear agendas of this piece of legislation is to put these principles in place so they can not just weaken the current legislation that we have, which doesn't go far enough, but so that they can start pulling it back, and they can start repealing the commitments that we've already made at an international level to stop climate change or to assist in the fight against climate change. But the corporates essentially are trying to slant the playing field against that type of legislation coming in, and also to provide a mechanism by which they can review the existing legislation that we already have, requiring us to move towards being more climate friendly and attacking, I guess, the corporates' bottom line in terms of what they are required to do to address climate change.
You know, I remember a number of years ago, Tupac Acosta, our Tōna Tierra leader who has now become an ancestor and Evie's mentor, asked me to write a paper around the trade agreements, particularly the NAFTA trade agreement, and its similarities to the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, and in particular, investor-state dispute settlement clauses, which really are very similar to the RSB, and this entire framework actually is very similar to those ISDS clauses in trade agreements, which essentially says that anytime the government passes a law that infringes upon the corporate property rights, the right to profit, then they are able to take them to these courts and sue them, and they do. Particularly the US corporations are incredibly litigious and have made trillions of dollars out of those tribunals in the World Trade Organization as well. And so we as a nation marched against the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, and in particular the ISDS clauses, and we managed to not get them taken out, but we had a level of success in having them removed and reframed within our trade agreements. But again, they go away and then they come up with a new idea to try and do the same thing. And so this is really what that is they're trying to lock in those very similar ISDS clauses that essentially allow corporations to sue governments so that the public winds up paying for any impact upon corporate profits as well. So
just picking up on that, one of the key differences between what they're trying to put into the regulatory standards bill and the ISDS provisions is that they're not only opening the doorway for these corporates to sue the government over particular pieces of legislation, they're also opening the door for them to sue whoever benefits from such laws. And that is an absolute and direct threat to our people being sued for legislation that protects our environment and legislation that, protects our rivers and our mountains and all of these natural resources that we have from these corporates, and gives them, a massive amount of power in terms of threatening litigation of this type, which we have not seen to date in Aotearoa. And it's one of the aspects of this bill which I think is very insidious, and we won't see the full ramifications of that unless this bill is passed.
Yeah, I'm just going to invite our sister Evie in at the moment. Evie, I don't know if you had any kind of thoughts to offer around the connections between our nations and what this means, kind of, especially as an Indigenous embassy, which Tōna Tierra is, and what this kind of sounds like and looks like from your perspective.
Absolutely. Thank you, sis. This is very devastating. We are at a turn of time right now. We are seeing these governments, colonizing governments, come after our people, our treaty rights, Indigenous peoples, all so-called minorities from every angle. And it all has to do with critical minerals, despite the fact that UN reports are saying that we don't have any more time. We have gotten to the point where our planet is not going to be sustained anymore. It's not going to be habitable. And so it's very, very important. We are the last line of defense. Indigenous peoples are the last line of defense in regards to protection of Mother Earth because of our treaty rights. And it's all connected. We as Indigenous peoples, our worldview is all interconnected. So if you attack our environment, you are attacking our our women's rights, you're attacking our human rights, you're attacking our water rights, you're attacking our land rights. You are attacking us from every angle, because everything that we do as a peoples is all interconnected. And so you cannot attack us in one area without affecting us in another area. And this is not just about an Indigenous issue anymore. We all live on this planet. We all need this planet to survive and to sustain life. And these continuous attacks by corporations and governments for profit is just, it's unimaginable that these individuals, these corporations are not thinking about the future generations. They are only thinking about lining their pockets, and they think that they're going to be able to buy their way out of the disaster that they're creating. There is no way to buy clean water once the water is contaminated. There is no way to escape toxic air once those uranium particles and other toxic minerals are released into the atmosphere. And they are trying to find ways to profit off of our planet in every way, shape, and form. And so what people really need to understand is how important this is. I ask you all, and I urge you to look at the legislation that's being passed. The tactic of these governments currently is to throw so many issues at us that we are not paying attention to the legislation that they are passing. And this is why this bill is so important. We are uplifting and highlighting this attack through what's happening in Aotearoa, because it is something that all governments are going to follow suit. We talk about this often in the Indigenous movement, is that these governments are speaking and conspiring together. We know this as a fact. The same way that people on the ground are working together, the governments are doing the same thing, and they are finding loopholes, and they are finding ways to continue to attack our treaty rights, our way of living, and it has to stop. And it won't stop if we don't if we don't stand up and demand it, if we don't bring attention to this issue, to all of the issues that we're facing right now, because like I said, they are all interconnected. So it's really, really important that we recognize that this is not just an attack on the Maori treaties. This is an attack on all treaties globally that Indigenous nations have with colonizing governments. It's also an attack on our Mother Earth, which means that it is an attack on all humanity, because we are fighting for the protection of our future generations. And that includes the future generations of the colonizing colonizing governments and corporations. We here now are fighting for the protection of your future generations, while at the same time you are trying to destroy it for profit. So it's really important if you can share this information, if you can make multiple submissions through your organizations, through your through yourself as an individual, and have your neighbors, have your parents, have your family members, people in your household also do a submission, because this is a numbers the numbers are really important when it comes to this particular submission. We've defeated it before. We will come back, we will defeat it again, and we will continue to challenge all of the future legislation that is put forward in front of us, attacking our rights. And that's not just in Aotearoa, that's here on Turtle Island, that's in Abya all of the north and south of this continent. And this is also an issue with our relatives in other areas. In Africa, we are seeing what's happening with our Palestinian relatives. We know that the whole reason that they are being attacked at the moment is because underneath Gaza is one of the largest untapped gas reserves, and oil reserves. And we know that the Israeli and the US governments are in cahoots to profit off of the genocide that's happening right now. And so they need to know that we understand their game, and we are going to fight against it with everything that we have. And however we need to do that, if it's sharing a post, remember everybody, we all have our strengths and how we can fight this fight. And whether it's submitting intervention through an international body, whether it's submitting your opposition to this treaty bill, whether it's posting on social media, whether it's having conversations with your family about the reality of what's happening across the world, whether it's having discussions with your children about what's happening, every single one of those acts is an act of defiance, and it's an act that we need to do in order to stop this. So advocacy happens on so many different levels. And so I really want to stress that nothing too small to fight against what's happening. There is nothing that is too small that you can do. Like I said, sharing a post, even making a donation, and it doesn't have to be a large donation, but every single donation that organizations that are doing to fight against these atrocious acts help in so many ways. So whatever you can do within your ability, we just ask you not to stop and to continue to do that, to continue to bring light to the violations of our collective rights as human beings, as humanity as a whole. We are under attack and we need to stand up.
Thank you, sis. And absolutely, just everything Evie just said was so on the mark right now. And this is a part of the issue is, these nations and the corporations, she's so right. The member states swap notes. So so-called USA, so-called Canada, New Zealand, Australia, Israel, and the UK are a part of a group, of a shared group within the United Nations and the Western European and others group. And so internationally, transnationally, they work together and share notes in that space. The UK, Canada, Australia, US and New Zealand are also a part of an international or transnational group called the Core Anglosphere. And up until the 90s, the Core Anglosphere used to draft their policies and legislation independently of each other and then come together to compare. Now, however, what international policy analysts have noticed is they're actually getting together at the table before they draft their legislation and look at how the legislation that they're drafting can be mutually supportive of each other. And some of that legislation includes border and immigration legislation. And so, within that Core Anglosphere, we would absolutely, our own government officials are absolutely aware of ICE policies. And at this moment, I just also wanted, from Koikuea and from us as Wahine and from Māori, send our solidarity and our aroha across to Great Turtle Island for everybody who is undergoing and experiencing ICE oppression and border and immigration oppression. We are appalled at what we are seeing, and we absolutely unreservedly stand in solidarity with that too. But that is exactly the example of how borders don't apply to oppressors. They are absolutely able to get together at a transnational space and strategize together and network with each other to facilitate their agendas and projects. Those borders and immigration oppressive policies, they apply to us. So we need to find ways to work together to what we call pull out the survey pegs, which is how we talk about, just undoing colonial oppression wherever you are locally. And it's pulling out those colonial survey pegs wherever you are. And that's what I'm hoping we can do. I can see we've just come to the end of our time now. So I'll pass it back to you. Thank you again, everybody, from all of us, from myself, Tanya from Koikuea. Thank you, Dani. Thank you, Mingsu, for supporting with the submission writing. Thank you, Amber, our interpreter, for your work. I know New Zealanders speak very fast. I just saw Jonathan pop up. Hi, Jonathan. Kia ora to all of our friends. Thank you, Rogie. Thank you, Tona Tira. Catalyst, Isla, everybody who has put their work in to support us with this. From the South, deep aroha to you all, and I'll pass it over to you, Evie, for our closing comments and prayer.
Thank you all so much again for joining us today. Again, we will be sending out this webinar via recording. If you registered, obviously you did because you're all here with us. You will get a link to the recording in the next day or so. Please share it out with your friends and your neighbors. The recording has all of the directions on how to submit an intervention. Because you were here and some of you were in the breakout rooms. I think that you have a good tutorial on how to assist your friends, family, and neighbors on how to do a submission. And please keep, if you would like to register onto the mailing list to continue to get further information, please visit the Tonatiuh website. And you can sign up for the newsletter, for our email alerts, and we will send out updates as this atrocious bill continues to try and make its way to get passed. We are going to make sure that we're updating folks, and we really do appreciate you taking the time to come out. So I'm going to just go ahead and do a very quick closing prayer to ground us in our way moving forward. So thank you again to all of our sponsors, to all of our team in the back end who assisted in making all of this possible. And of course, thank you to our Maori relatives, our sister Tina and Tanya and Danny, and all of our relatives who are on the ground fighting the good fight. We are here with you. We appreciate your solidarity and know that we are all in this fight together. So thank you all so much. Lasokamati o Mateo, we thank you again for bringing us together with amazing people today that have a lot of dedication and love in their hearts, that want to help and do something to fight against the systematic oppression that we're all experiencing, that we're all feeling. We are in this together, and we thank you, Lord. We thank you, Creator, to give us. We ask that you give us the strength to continue to fight. We ask that you give us the strength and the knowledge and all of the love from our ancestors that walk behind us. We ask that you honor them and give them these prayers that we're sending up. Give them this information and this knowledge to help guide us moving forward in this fight. We ask that you give us the strength to continue to do this, because it's very, very difficult, Creator. This work is so heavy on all of us, and we are all under attack at the moment. And so we ask that you please give us the strength to continue moving forward. And thanks to all of our relatives who are here with us, standing in solidarity across the globe. We put prayers down for all of our people who are oppressed, who are suffering, our people who are experiencing a genocide, who are experiencing loss of land, and those who we are not hearing from, those who are suffering silently because they don't have access to share their stories. We put those prayers out for them as well, Creator. And we thank you again for allowing us to be here together and to fight this fight. Thank you all again for joining us. Please, please, please have a wonderful day and stay connected. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.